I have wanted to perform for as long as I can remember. I have always liked being the center of attention, as long as I felt like that attention was positive, and I've always liked making people laugh and laughing myself. And so I also have always cared a lot about responsibility and making sure that my life was a positive influence in the lives of other people. And so for me, I guess, trying to figure out if I could do that while also being a performer was kind of an interesting middle ground. I wanted to be able to pay for myself, and I wanted to be able to be responsible to the people in my lives and not a burden on them. So I tried to want to do other things for a while, and I did pay for myself, working in retail and, just doing various different kinds of jobs. And I still do certainly promotional work and things that aren't necessarily artistic in nature, but I kept coming back to the theater and finding ways that I felt like the theater made people's lives better. A lot of the work that I do now is with children, and sometimes people will, ask me, a good friend of mine's mother, from when I was a child, once visited, and we had a layover in the airport, and I met her there, and she asked me if I was ever going to do any real theater, at a time when I was paying for my life through theater, but because she didn't see doing shows that were performed for children as, having the same value as performing on Broadway. And it struck me as a very strange question, because I have always felt like the theater that you do for kids is just as valuable, because it can be a really important turning point in their lives when they see something and it makes them think about something in a different way, or opens them up to embrace, things that they're interested in the world that they might not have considered before, or just to have a cathartic experience and share that with somebody else. So for me, that was never an issue. The fact that the show that I am doing now is self-written and self-produced is a whole new world for me, and it's very different from theater for kids. Although there is nothing in it that I think is unsafe for children, they just aren't its target market. But I realized in talking with everyone, and I love talking, as you may have gathered, that I had a little different life experience as a child. I was raised by parents who took us on vacations to nude resorts on a regular basis, and it gave us a much greater comfort level with our bodies, and maybe more importantly with other people's bodies, and with the range of normal within the human condition of the human species, that is often shocking to people when I mention it to them, and sometimes alarming and scary. And in America, people are trained to hate their bodies no matter what they look like. And that's very sad to me. And I didn't, a lot of attention is focused on the media and the way that the media celebrates sexuality in humanity and fashion and that sort of thing, but actually not very much attention is focused on nudity. It's swept under the rug largely. It's kind of this dirty secret that we have to be naked sometimes, but and I just think it's really kind of sad. So seeing as I wasn't able to address all of these opinions I have in the work that I'd been cast in and was doing for and with other people, much of which I absolutely love, and I love being a tool to put someone else's vision on stage. When I have that opportunity, I love collaboration. But I decided that, I'd probably better step up and be the spearhead of a collaboration that could talk about some of the agendas that I have that that I wanted to, get a little bit more light, and mostly because because I think it can make the world a better place.
How?
How? Of course, you know, a 1-hour show, and my show's really 50 minutes with, you know, some padding for audience response, and, you know, we'll just see what it turns out being. I hope to just get people thinking a little bit about the assumptions that they've made and how, you know, and how our upbringing and the things that we see as children really shapes who we become as adults, and a lot of that we don't second guess, and we don't sort of, you know, in many ways even have the capacity to figure out why we became the people we did, because it's so ingrained. People, when I talk about doing this naked show, so many people talk about how brave they think it is, and that's such a big part of the cultural climate. You know, it's not inherently brave to be naked. We're all born naked. You know, being naked is your most natural state. The reason it's brave is because we're trained to believe that it's inappropriate, and of course it is illegal, you know, on the streets. I'm not encouraging publicly nudity where it's not embraced, but I would encourage government to consider why it has those rules, and the difference between a person actively behaving provocatively and a person, you know, just not wearing clothes, which is the absence. You know, a nude body is not the same as a provocative body, and I could go into a whole nother subtopic on, you know, the problems that we make with assumptions about the messages people send through the clothing they're wearing. But I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew, so, you know, this show that I'm working on right now is really, it is a monologue about my childhood and growing up, and I grew up in England. My parents are Midwestern, but my father worked for the National Security Agency overseas, and so we had easier access to nude resorts, although there are nude resorts near almost every large city in America. They are less well known because they don't want to draw negative attention to themselves, so they try to make themselves easy to find to the people that are looking for them because they are interested in, you know, hanging out naked, but not to people who will target them and accuse them of being, you know, impropriety. They're specifically trying to make sure that they're a haven for people who want an escape rather than a place making a big statement, even if it is what they believe in. So this is why it's scary for me being in America and essentially making that statement more publicly, because it's not really done. But I kind of think maybe it should be.
I think of all, I can't get over your father being engaged with the National Security Agency. I mean, so you have Bradley Manning essentially taking the clothes off of every diplomat in the world, and then being stripped for forever in his little cell, and then the recent charge that the National Security Agency is making us all virtually naked, especially with regard to our interest in nakedness, since it now appears that they're able to track keystrokes. You know, so that all of the upstanding people who are worried about their pornographic interests and whatever interests, you know, just got a warning from someone who's probably unreliable that they should really worry about that. So this is trackable. So you've got this whole issue of how much do I reveal, how much am I out there, which is ringing resonances with especially national security right now.
Sure.
And then on airport scanners, for crying out loud.
Oh yeah.
So it's an issue that's multiply in the air.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You know, I'm a bit of an energetic believer, I guess. I do think that you know, this play came about at the time when it was most needed, when the zeitgeist had sort of, you know, it's a part of what is happening now and what people are talking about now, in a way that I didn't plan, because I've been talking about doing this play for, you know, probably 10 years. It was just, you know, actually getting the gumption up to, you know, for the first several years, I kind of had to just noodle on exactly how I wanted to put it together and what I wanted it to look like. And then it took me a few years to get my ping pong ball drawn in the lottery for the Fringe Festival, because it's part of the Minnesota Fringe Festival, which has 176 shows this year. Maybe it's 174 now, the numbers fluctuate a little bit. But it's a non-juried festival, which means that everybody who wishes to be a part of it purchases an application, and that is represented by a ping pong ball in a giant sort of bingo spinner thing. And if your number is drawn, you are lucky and you get to do a show, but it, you know, there is no weight to any one ball over another ball, so it's just the luck of the draw. So people do sometimes question that, and I would tell those people that they are wrong, because I am absolutely confident that the Fringe Festival does not favor one performer over another. It's just, it is true that in the last 3 weeks, people who perhaps bit off a little bit more than they could chew, didn't understand what they were getting into, will start dropping out. And then the Fringe does keep a list that's just from everybody who applied, of email addresses of people who say, even if it's at the last second, tell me and I've still got a show I can throw in. So some seasoned performers may perform more often than others because they can still throw something in at the last second that they've just prepared. But other than that, it's a true open field. So it just took my ping pong ball a few years to be the lucky one. And that was probably a gift to me, because I talk a lot and I'm excited about this project, people have been asking me, oh, Natalie, when are you going to do your big naked Fringe play? And so it's kind of taken on a life of its own outside of my mind before I had even written it. You know, it had been a thing that I had floated at so many parties and, you know, in so many casual conversations that people were getting excited about it and helping me to figure out how to frame my story. I wanted it to be a little bit more about why we dress the way we do, but the way that I figured out, it's something of a coming of age story, really. It kind of ends at, you know, when I really got comfortable, if indeed I ever did, but when I kind of got into puberty and sort of came into my own as a person who would just kind of, you know, wear something fun because it was fun and enjoy the things that I liked, even though I'd always been encouraged to do that. And I know that I am so fortunate to have had parents who, you know, who never tried to tell me who to be, other than to be a responsible person in the world, which is why that has become such a crux of my being, I think. You know, when you are given freedom and told that you deserve that freedom, and the way that you earn it is by being a good person in the world, you want to be a good person in the world. I think it's when you are told that there are all sorts of caveats that may or may not fit into who you feel like you essentially are, and you are told that you have to become something, that you fight against that. Or if you're not nurtured enough and, you know, you're not given the kind of care and attention that we really need to thrive as humans. So a lot of this show is about how even when you are given that nurturing, it's still hard to figure out who you want to be. I mean, man, it's complicated being human. There's billions and trillions of choices that you can make on a daily basis. But that's also the beauty of it. You remake yourself every day, and you can be anything. So we need to help each other to recognize that and to go ahead and help them make their dreams come true. The people that have helped me to bring this project to fruition, I mean, I'm amazed and overwhelmed by all of the contributions that have come, you know, from all different directions. And I am scared that there might be a backlash, because there is a big community that doesn't recognize nudity as a natural state that it's okay to be in, and that really believes that it should be sequestered. And it'll be really interesting to see, you know, if any of those people want to talk to me about it, because I would be happy to have a conversation. But I'm a bit Midwestern, I'm a bit conflict avoidant, I won't lie to you, so I'll try, you know, I will always try to sort of take it back to the, the friendliest way of conversing about it we can. And I've tried really hard to make this a show that is relatable to everyone, regardless of whether you've actually encountered these specific experiences, but that also is funny and is fun more than anything else. So yes, you will get bang for your buck on nudity. It is set in a nude resort, and you know, I do talk about my life and expound on some philosophical points, but it always comes back to the punchline. I think that's actually because I was raised in England. There's a great book called Watching the English by Kate Fox. That's a sociological book on why English, or sociological study on why British people behave the way they do, that says, in England, everyone wants everything to be a tea party. They never want to talk about money, and they want to bring everything back to humor. And that's what this show is. This is the British side of me. I want it to be a bit of a tea party where we're having fun, and you know, we sort of, you know, we talk about things, but we talk about them in the through the kaleidoscope of a joke and of recognizing the ways that we have all experienced these ridiculous things in the world.
Well, I'm a little bit handicapped. I mean, the trade-off for getting this video out in time to actually do your show some good,
oh, sure,
is that I didn't get to see it before I did it, which leaves me. So on the one hand, there are all sorts of things I want to ask that might steal thunder from the show, and if they do, just, you know, wave them off appropriately. Okay. But I do need to, I mean, the things that are coming to mind to ask are, I mean, it seems to me that what you're offering is something like this. You had a rather unusual childhood by U.S. standards, and you learned some things from it that, in your estimation, a bunch of Minnesotans haven't learned.
Sure.
And you want to share that.
Yes, I think that's very fair.
And so I wanted to know more about that childhood. And especially your thinking, you as a thinking person in that childhood, as you became aware that your family wasn't the normal family, at least the normal American family. How was it? How was it to grow up as a sort of junior G-man nudist in England?
Although there is more cultural acceptance of nudity in England, I would say, as a general rule. I think a lot of British people do vacation on the continent, which, you know, means Europe to them. So in France and Croatia and Germany, and places where the beaches are often at least topless, and in many cases nude beaches, unless you're otherwise told that you have to wear swimsuits there. It's kind of the opposite of here. Well, very much so. It's quite rare to find nude beaches here, although some, of course, do exist. And many of them are not sanctioned, and so that's, you know, a whole separate subsection of the conversation. And I wish there were more. And to be honest, if it was up to me, and I know this doesn't quite answer your question, but people sometimes ask me this, if it was up to me, I would say that nudity, public nudity, really is fine. I think it's about how people behave towards each other that makes things a problem. And I think when we sanction attire, we are being misguided, because the way we dress doesn't actually do anything to anyone else. It's when we dress and then stick our butt right in someone's face that, you know, that person's face is affronted. You know, having to actually see it across the room, well, that's just a kind of prudishness that you're not actually being hurt, you just want to be upset about something. And So, whole separate conversation. But, so growing up in England, there maybe was more acceptance of nudity, and we certainly vacationed in places where it was fine. But England itself, you certainly don't run into much nudity, and it certainly is still largely sexualized when you do. And there are more pornographic pictures in newspapers, and you know, some things are a little more liberal, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I grew up sort of between cultures and still in a strange place. It wasn't that my friends in England necessarily did the same things I did, so I definitely felt like what my family was doing was strange. And I was always a child who wanted everyone to like me, and I still am. An adult who wants everyone to like me. And it's partly because I genuinely do like most people. I'm fascinated by why people do the things they do and like the things they do. And it gets a bit complicated for me because of course you cannot get to know huge swaths of the population particularly well. So for me figuring out, you know, where to spend my energy and how to get close to people has sometimes been challenging. But the actual experience of then discovering that my family wasn't actually doing the same things that these other people were doing and why they were behaving strangely was a curious notion, because, you know, of course all kids start as these little pods that are protected by their parents and that don't necessarily have a lot of interaction with the outside world. And if your parents are nice to you, then they're the center of your universe for really a long time. So when you start to realize that you want other people to like you as well, but maybe they don't behave quite the same as your parents, and how to behave in a world that won't lose your parents' you know, affection for you. Not that that was ever really a risk, but it feels like a risk when you're trying to figure out who else to be. And you know, that whole teenage thing where you're trying to establish your own identity and you really do still want your parents to like you. Almost all kids do, but you act out a bit, or you genuinely feel embarrassed by your parents because, of course, when you get a little bit older, you kind of do start to lose some of those inhibitions, hopefully, if you're lucky. And as a teenager, working through them, it seems as if everything that you do is under scrutiny, when in reality, you know, one person notices, and that's predominantly you. The things that are different. I know I'm kind of talking in circles. I find it really hard to get a grip on that question, because I only grew up once. You know, I don't actually know what it is to grow up as somebody else. I don't know what it is to grow up in Minnesota. And I don't know if anybody does grow up and think, oh, my family's normal. I think there are levels of dysfunction and levels of confusion no matter how and where you grow up. It's just the more I've talked about my childhood, the more I've realized that it is a little skewed from the average experience, and the ways that it is were really gifts to me that allowed me to be freer in myself than a lot of my friends.
So if I get this, if I understand right, you know, you went on vacation for like a couple, 3 weeks, and so you arrive at this place and your whole family takes off all their clothes and puts them on 3 weeks later. Is that the general picture?
Yeah, I mean, you go, before you get there, you have typically done a bunch of paperwork. There are background checks, and they're expecting you. They let you into the gated community, and they check you in, and they give you, you know, your little villa or a high-rise apartment, whatever it is. Different RVs, different places, you know, have different accommodations, just like resorts here. And then you often have to wear clothes in the restaurants, and you're often prohibited from wearing clothes on the beach or in the swimming pool. And then depending on the place, you know, if it's cold, you can wear clothes usually. You know, if the resort is in England, you're not going to actually get naked most of the time because it's 50 degrees, and people might, but So depending on the location, a lot of places are clothing optional, but there are places that you are expected to be nude, you know, all the time. And generally speaking, adolescents are given a pass on that, so.
So what was the sort of place your family sought out? Were you?
Oh, we always loved visiting different places, and you know, actually going off and sometimes, you know, going into the town and visiting the actual country we were in was interesting as well to us. So it wasn't just about sitting around naked. There was a hotel in the south of England that I called the Little Girl Hotel, because there was a little girl about my age who I would play with there. I don't actually even know what the hotel was called. But that I didn't realize until last week was a nude hotel. My mother was like, we were just talking about the different places we'd gone, and she said, well, you know, we used to go to the Little Girl Hotel all the time. I said, well, I know, but... And she's like, well, that was a naked hotel. Oh. In my memory, the nudity just wasn't a thing until I hit puberty, really. So to be honest, I don't remember that about a lot of the places, although I know that it was true. I remember it about Corsica for some reason. And then I was older when we went to Croatia, so that was different. We went to the south of France when I was a teenager. But actually being a child, that wasn't a big thing. That didn't matter to me. It was just a convenience of being in some nice weather and being able to wear clothes or not wear clothes.
So when you go back in memory to some of these places, are there, you know, scenes where you're not clear whether you were clothed or not?
I guess so. Well, yeah. I mean, the Little Girl Hotel, I really only remember that I enjoyed playing with the little girl, but what she actually looked like, you know, is kind of fuzzy to me. I just remember it as a social experience that was important in my life. I do remember, I don't know how old I was when we went to Corsica, maybe 8 or 9, and that I do remember that we were naked running around orienteering, but maybe just because I was a little bit older and so I can, you know, actually picture it a little bit better. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question though, and when that starts to matter and why it does.
When I think about going to the local nudist resort myself, and get an invitation from time to time from people, and it's one I take kind of seriously. I know that taking off my clothes is going to be a big deal. You know, I mean, and I don't have any beliefs about the moral status of that. It's still going to be a big deal. What I'm hearing from you is that, you know, over and over again at these places, as a kid, the moment in which everybody just stopped wearing clothes or decided this afternoon was so hot they weren't going to, wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. As a kid, that was definitely true. In our house, we would be naked. You know, people would get out of the shower and walk around until they dried off and then put clothes on when they started to get cold, and it was fine. You know, I saw my parents and my sister naked enough that, you know, it just wasn't a relevant thing. And the fact that other people were naked, you know, they were just other people that I didn't know. Why would I care if they were wearing clothes or not? They weren't trying to do anything. This is the thing. They weren't trying to do anything to me with their naked bodies. They were just walking around with them. And so they were, you know, kind of insignificant. I was there to hang out with my family. We played cards. We, you know, went swimming. We took walks. We read books. And whether or not we were actually wearing clothes just wasn't an issue. But as I've been working on this show and talking to people about, you know, about it and how it would look, and a lot of my friends are artists, and, you know, so they would be excited and they would love it. Oh, wow, what a great idea, fantastic. Say, oh, cool, do you want to be in it? Oh, well, I mean, I'll come and see it, but, I mean, I'm just not in a place with myself where I can, and not people of all, you know, shapes, sizes, backgrounds, you know, ethnicities, genders. You know, I really talked to as broad a spectrum of humanity as I could find to talk to, and overwhelming how many people said, well, I mean, I think it's great that you're doing it, but you've got to be kidding me. I mean, me? And some just couldn't. I mean, there were people that would have been excited but couldn't make it work in their, you know, work schedule, etc. And some that were just concerned about their careers. There was a woman, I believe it was in California, that was fired because she was an elementary school teacher and parents of the kids found pictures of her from before her teaching career where she had posed in a bikini. In a bikini. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. And because that can happen in America, and because we don't have a concept of the separation between attire and behavior that is, you know, absolutely crucial, and a recognition that there's a time and place for everything. And I'm not actually trying to change the world overnight, but I just would like it if we could think about it a little bit more. And I am scared. You know, I do work with kids and I do work all over the place, but I'm very, very careful to not talk about the issues that I think their parents would, you know, not agree with me on with those kids. You know, I draw the boundaries so that they can consider things for themselves, but it's the things that are not my job are not my job. You know, I don't talk about these issues when it's not the point of me in their lives. So when I'm teaching, you know, I talk about the alphabet and the colors of the rainbow, and other issues I would only address if, you know. Do we have to change rooms? Or?
Well, we will if we can. If we don't have to. Just go ahead. Let me just check on something.
Sure.
You know, I mean, for all the kind of casualness of this all, your parents were choosing over and over again clothing optional places.
Sure.
And I expect that did some limit in the kind of sites you could see, and you know, I mean, it's a subset. And the same way, kind of despite the fact that you, at least as a kid, as a young kid, didn't find it to be a very big deal in any context, whether you were wearing clothes or not.
Yeah.
You are pretty clear that something about you was heavily affected, marked, shaped by that experience. Now,
yeah.
So I'm curious, for you and for your parents, what is nudity is a big deal in a certain way. You're willing to make some pretty serious risks into your professional life by doing this play.
Sure.
It's something you've worked on for years.
Sure.
I mean, this is not a trivial matter to you. So what's the importance of it for you? I mean, why is it? I mean, if you were to attract somebody like me to check out the local nudist resort, what's the big deal?
It's an interesting question. Why does it matter so much to me? Because it isn't actually something I seek out, and to be very clear, although I philosophically absolutely support it and I want to jump up and down about it in this forum, it actually isn't. I kind of personally feel like I'm already at peace with my body, and I'm at peace with your body, and what I want is to allow other people to find that same peace for themselves. And I feel like having places where you can be naked and have that be normal and have it be recognized that every shape of human is a fine shape to be is really important. My mother was only a nudist because my father was. She met a man she liked and had already moved out to Maryland when he said, hey, let's hang out in the nude resort. And my father is the reason our family is so idiosyncratic. I mean, my mother was looking for a ticket out of North Dakota, which I say in the play, and a little different life than she had grown up with, and my father was the way that she found it, and so because he was interested in this nude lifestyle, she decided to try it out. And my father came to it because he is a thinker, and his logical mind dominates his decision making. So because to him there was no logical reason, as long as you were not misbehaving, that you shouldn't be able to be naked with other people. But this is, you know, you could be misbehaving with or without clothes. People misbehave all the time, you know, and so as long as you were responsible with the liberties you were given, being naked in many climates is more comfortable than not being naked. We have a dance in my show, and one of my cast was saying, you know, that having done it a few times naked, he felt so encumbered when he had to put his shorts back on because we were rehearsing in a place where nudity wasn't allowed, and you know, they felt so burdensome after having the freedom of not having to wear them. So there is an actual physical freedom. Your skin can breathe and you can feel the breeze, you know, right on you, and when you skinny dip, you know, that water is you know, next to your body directly. That is different than experiencing it in clothing and hanging out with people that way. Actually, Dad was just saying to me the other day that naked people have been studied and proven to be less aggressive. When you are naked together, you are more accepting and more willing to be kind to your fellow man, because you've stripped away one of the ways that you identify yourself as a different thing. You identify yourself through your clothing as a person who dresses like this and acts like this. And when you see other people, then you know, make judgments based on what they're wearing about what they are telling you. And whether we want to or not, every time we put on clothes, we're making statements about who we are in the world. So being naked is one of the ways we can say, hey, I'm just a gal, or I'm just a guy, or I'm just a person who doesn't want to be constricted by specific gender, whatever it is. You know, if I'm about anything, I'm about not telling people who they need to be and letting them decide that. And, you know, if they decide to be somebody else the next day, you know, the trick, I think, becomes that, of course, when you know people, you will always think of the things they told you before, and they do have to tell you when they decide to be someone else, but we can, and it's great. And so for me, I really feel like it's been a gift recognizing that, that even though I love dressing up sometimes, on a day-to-day basis, I will often, you know, slough around and whatever, because my mission that day is to get something done, and it isn't so much to spend time figuring out who I want to be. So, but I like experimenting with it. It's important to me, actually, that I have an identity that isn't based in me looking gorgeous all the time. I want people to like me because they like me, because I'm fun to be with, and you know, hopefully interesting and, you know, smart enough. But I want them to like me when I'm in sweatpants as much as they like me when I'm in a fun, crazy dress. And I want them to know, you know, that it's great that we can dress up for each other, and it's a way of saying, hey, you know, I want to show you that, you know, I do appreciate this chance to be with you, and I want to look good for you because I want to be something fun for you to look at. You know, it's kind of a gift we give to people when we dress up for them. But at the same time, giving them a chance to be close to us when we are our most basic selves is a gift too. You know, it's saying, I trust you to see me messy. And that's overlooked a lot here. And, you know, it can be done different ways. but it's just something that I think is overlooked a lot. And I think we talk a big game about acceptance and about, you know, loving your body and looking after your body. And it's true, I do think, you know, if you exercise, you feel better. I mean, I think that is proven too. But you don't know why people are the size and shape they are. And there are so many things other than exactly, you know, how many calories they ate that day that go into why they wanted to eat those calories and where they grew up and, you know, what their influences were. And you just don't know what all of those many choices are and what their health conditions might be. And lots of health stuff isn't visible from the outside. So you gotta try to give people the benefit of the doubt and recognize that you don't know everything about them. And nude resorts, I think, do that to a certain extent. When all these people, all these liberated people that were excited about the show told me, you know, that they loved the idea and they absolutely weren't ready to do it because they weren't comfortable with themselves. I mean, it was sad for me. And, you know, I hope maybe seeing the show, maybe they'll reconsider for the remount. Not that there is one, but I'm, you know, in a theoretical way, you know, I do want to break down those barriers a bit. And another thing that's been interesting is how very much people are concerned. It was a big deal for me that this show is not about sex, and that's a whole nother issue, and it's not about profanity, it's not about being shocking, it's just about considering nudity. I said to someone, you know, this isn't a sexy show, and he said to me, well, it's gonna be a bit sexy. And I said, I really don't know what you mean. And he said, you're all gonna be naked. And I think this is an interesting point, that we can't see naked people without thinking about sex in our culture, and that I think is something that, you know, I really want to encourage. You don't think about sex when you look at little kids, with any luck, unless you were socialized in an unfortunate way, and, you know, that's a whole nother problem, you know, that a lot of those kinds of social issues, people who were themselves abused as children are most likely to be abusers. You know, you see it if it's what your experience was, but a person healthily raised does not see that, and you know, hopefully there are ways. I'm not a social worker. I don't know the rules of all this. I just read some articles, but you know, hopefully there are ways that we can help people to recognize why that's not good for the children and why you need to give them the space to be children and then make choices about when to become sexual beings. But so, for kids to see naked people that are not being sexual keeps it just like all other people. That they aren't thinking about that yet. That's not in their mind. It's their stage of development, you know, hasn't become about sex, and it can be beautiful and not be sexy. It can be neutral. And we get very confused about nudity here because we think that if somebody sees you naked, they either think you're sexy or think you're disgusting. Those are our two choices. We aren't given, oh, you know, you're naked and I'm cool with that. You know, we're just given the either, oh, hubba hubba, or, oh, ugh, why? Get away from me. And I think that's really wrong thinking. The world isn't binary. We shouldn't be one or the other. There's a very broad spectrum. And you can find somebody attractive, and this is another thing I think is really fascinating. People seem to think, some people, not all people of course, but that if you see someone that is sexually attractive to you, you pretty much gotta, you know, get with them immediately. And it's crazy. I'm not making a big claim that people should necessarily mate for life, but if you do get married, it doesn't mean that you stop seeing other people as attractive. It means that you're making a choice to commit to another person because for you, there's a reason that union makes you more than you were as a single individual, and you know, you can together do things like raise children, you know, and so you can take turns being the one who's at work or the one who's, you know, doing something else, whereas on your own, it can be really hard to be there 24/7 for another being. And of course I know tons and tons of people do it, and who knows who I might be in the future. Right now, these are all theoreticals, but but I think it's something that you know, is really worth considering, and people make all sorts of choices for themselves on the assumption that you can have one thing or another thing. And really what you can have is a giant broad spectrum, and the important thing is that you're honest with yourself and the other people that you actually affect. You know, the other people who are in these social contracts with you, as long as everybody's on the same page and is happy with the deal that you've struck, that's great. But communication is key, and communication is hard. So I guess I'm trying to share in this show something of the ways that I started to understand how to exist as my own human being within a larger construct, and that I could see, oh hey, this is one option. I don't need to do this all the time. Most people don't do this. You know, part of it, I'm highly social. I love living in a big city. I love living in Minneapolis, where when I go to the theater, I almost always run into someone I know and you know, get to visit with them. I grew up in a very small town, and I loved everybody knowing me, but sort of the fringe community is actually my favorite microcosm. It's the 11 days when I walk down the street and everybody knows my name, just about, you know, certainly everyone but the tourists, you know, as it would have been in my hometown. And I don't mean to say that the fringe goers I don't know are tourists, but you know, the ones that you haven't come in contact with yet. So for me, it would be hard to limit a lot of my social activity to a place that in, you know, Minnesota, the nude resort is a relatively small group of people, and but it's an interesting thing. I am a bit warped by the sitcom Friends, and the idea that I kind of do feel like I'm supposed to have 5 people that I hang out with every day, and I don't do that. And the reality is, of course, I can have lots more friends than that, because let's face it, as an exceedingly verbal processor, if 5 people had to hear the number of times I have to work through the same material to figure out who I am, I think they may go nuts. And so I spread that out a little bit wider than that. But I'm so lucky to have my parents and my sister who do a lot of listening for me, and some close friends that I do talk through things with on a more frequent basis. But you know, for me, part of the reason I don't choose it is because it is one tiny piece of the big picture, and although I think it's fascinating and fabulous, there are just so many other things that I want to explore as well. So in this show, I'm kind of introducing a lot of people who might not be aware of what that little subculture is about, so that they can be more appreciative of it, and maybe they can partake. I have been to the nudist campsite north of town, and I had a great time, and they are bringing coupons to the show, so if you would like to check it out, you know, please come and see it, and we'll get you a discount on admission, and you can go up and you know, check out what that lifestyle really feels like, and you know, maybe get in touch, you know, with your own appreciation for your body, and you know, see a few other bodies and recognize how many ways a body can be. It's awesome.
What I'm hearing is a little bit sort of been there, done that here. And I'm wondering if that's right. That is, that this, you know, being naked with other people is not something you feel you need to do very much now. Is that right?
Yeah. I go when my parents want to go. It's not so often, you know, but if we want to visit a place and we have options between a, you know, a place that's clothing optional and a place that isn't, we might, you know, and they're next door to each other, or we can still go down the road and visit Pompeii or whatever it is. You know, we would probably choose the clothing optional one, because then you can go skinny dipping, and that's awesome. But I'm kind of more interested in Pompeii, so I'll still pick, you know, a place near that rather than specifically go to a place myself with a nude campsite. Having said that, man, I love me some hot springs, you know, to get up there. And, you know, it's fascinating. Nudity, of course, is seen differently in many cultures than it is here. Maybe all, but I haven't done the research. But, you know, for example, Japan, which in many ways is a differently developed country than America is, has these giant communal bathing facilities where everybody gets naked together and wanders around and goes in between all of these different pools and is loving it, and then also has a culture on the street that would never consider, you know, being anything but absolutely proper. And for us, it's hard to recognize that you can still be absolutely proper while you are, you know, all nude together. But there are behavioral expectations there, and if everybody knows the rules and pays attention, then, you know, everybody feels safe, and you can run around naked just as easily as you can in clothes. It's just about understanding each other's expectations, and I think that's a big fear we have. We think when we get naked, then we have to, you know, do sexy things, and we don't. We just don't. So there it is.
Well, you have a fair amount of experience having been to the variety of these places that you've been about what it is to initiate casual relationships, friendships, with and without clothes.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, is there a difference? Is there a big difference in how friendships form, in how far they go, in the friendship direction and depth?
I think I'm actually not really qualified to answer this question, and it's because I have never been an actual member of a campsite as an adult where I vacationed frequently enough in the same place that I saw the same people often enough to form friendships. The casual conversation is pretty similar, except that often at nude resorts you don't give last names and you don't talk about professions because people don't want people want anonymity because of the cultural taboo in the outside world. It's important for them, for the nude resort to be a place where they are just their personality. And I get that. I do think that's cool. For me, it's a little bit hard because a big part of my personality is in being a performer. You know, I've been very fortunate that I've been able to do something I genuinely love for a profession, and I'm, you know, finding ways to create work for myself. And, you know, if I'm really lucky, I would kind of love to tour this show. Let me just put this out there, world. What I would kind of like to do with this show would be to tour it to colleges and maybe other fringe festivals, but it's unrealistic for me to take a band of 10 people all over the country. It's way too expensive, you know, putting them up in hotels, all this stuff. So what I would really like would be to come to places and, you know, do workshops about the nudity and talk about it and, you know, the body image, and maybe have the college students who were comfortable and interested in exploring that, and people from the community that wanted to be naked on stage come and be placed in, you know, as my nude resort. Because I feel like the show would lose a lot if I just did it as a monologue show. And I think it is, my cast, boy, my cast are people who did not know each other for the most part when they decided to do this show. Often they were individuals who had only met me. My parents, I had met them before, and they are in the show. But the rest of the cast are a fascinating cross-section of my life who, for whatever reason, liked the idea enough and trusted me enough, even though in many cases, you know, we only knew each other a little bit, that they said, all right, let's do this. And watching them get to know each other and, you know, increase that trust in each other. And Kate Hoff wrote an amazing blog that really makes me feel like no matter how the show is received, the show has been a success because it has made her think differently about her body and how it's received by others and how it can exist in the world. And that's what I hope for everyone. And I would love to be able to take that to different places. And so, you know, if that sounds good to you, let's talk. Or maybe I could get a grant. But.
Well, I think you're going to succeed if you try, because Spencer Tunick has done a similar experiment all over the United States and all over the world to astonishing success. And I think you will. And I think it'll be pretty interesting what kinds of growth happen. I want to get back, though, to a point you were mentioning before about the anonymity of these places.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I think it's weird, to be honest, but it is a thing.
Well, I'm thinking about, you know, if I were sitting across from your dad right now, my first question to him, if he identified himself fully, would be, so what do you think about this Bradley Manning stuff?
Well, and here's the deal. The show gives you a skewed vision because I tell you things about him that you wouldn't know, that he wouldn't tell you. He would never say that. And he's actually only okay with this show because it is my perspective on things. I wrote it. You know, he's willing to act in it, but it's not his words. He's not actually making any statements about the NSA, and he's very tight-lipped about some of those things. He will give you some opinions, but if you met him in a nude resort, he wouldn't bring that up. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that, you know, I mean, one of the reasons I'm curious about this is because it would change the topics of conversation. And I'm really curious at a basic level about whether people trained as we are in the culture we're in would have much to say to each other.
You know, that's really interesting. The people that I have met at nude resorts, so, you know, I can't say that I've become close friends with people, so I can't compare my friendships with them to my friendships with other people I've spent a lot of time with, but the socializing that I have done at nude resorts has, you know, really exposed me to a lot of super friendly people, and we often talk more about how we grew up, which other nude resorts we've been to, where we like to vacation. You still talk plenty, you just don't have to be grounded in what you do for a living. When I meet people, even in the normal world, I almost always ask them what they do for fun or what they think is interesting right now, because I don't want them to feel like they have to identify themselves as working people. And sometimes people are very confused by that, but the reason I do it is because I don't want them to feel like there's one thing about them I want to know, when really what I'm interested in is figuring out what makes them tick. Like, why do you do the things you do in the world? And how to ask that is complex.
But am I understanding right? I mean, just as an accident of the kinds of places you visited, that you don't have any deep friendships with anybody you met at a nude resort.
Yeah, but you have to understand that as an adult, I've only been twice in the last 12 years.
But I mean, I'm thinking though, as a teenager, you were there
for 2 weeks.
Yeah, but the 2 weeks didn't lead to correspondence, didn't lead to let's meet again sometime, didn't lead to I really want to meet your family, you sound like a really neat person. That kind of stuff didn't happen.
But you see, I wouldn't say that that's happened on any of my clothed vacations either. That might just be a part of how I exist as a human in the world.
Okay.
I don't think that I have become less close to people because we met naked than I have not become close to people I met clothed.
Well, that's part of what I'm trying to understand, is does it help community?
Yeah,
or does it help friendship? Does it help understanding? Does it set a barrier? Is it just about the same, only with different topics? That's the kind of thing. And I could give, I don't care about clothes, but I do care about community. And I'm curious about the flavor of community that nudity makes possible.
I think that based on what I saw most recently at the campsite in local here, that there's a very strong community there, that people all know each other and chat with each other. They were making a big deal of all introducing themselves to us and, making themselves open as people that we could, chat with about different things. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever been approached by more people in a small period of time that were, excited that I was interested in something they were interested in, which was just wandering around without our clothes on, and, wanted to know my name, my first name, and, a little bit about my experience with being nude and why that was interesting to me. So I actually do think for people who find it really compelling and fun in the world, that is a thing that really bonds them together, and that it makes them the people that they are.